Yeah, look, essentially what we're dealing with is a large clan-based, I would call it a crime syndicate, that has taken over at the very highest level, a lot of the world's largest corporations and financial institutions.
Yeah, you talked earlier about people who own the ability to make money. And you're involved in this titanic struggle, if you like, you and others, against these people because of how corrupt they are and how they already own everything and what their intentions are for us. Is that correct?
Yeah. What happened to me, the reason I got involved is it started out with a very simple but profound, important thought, which is that according to the public financial statistics, the Japanese people, that's the government and private sector, have $8 trillion in overseas holdings. And the UN Development Report, says that you only need 200 billion to end poverty and 400 billion to stop environmental destruction. So I said, my goodness, the Japanese could end poverty, stop environmental destruction, and have more than $7 trillion left over to, explore the universe or something. So why aren't they doing it? And I thought, all right, I'm going to get Japanese citizenship. I'm going to run for office. I'm going to ask for the job of managing Japan's overseas assets and do this. I know it's big, but it was realistic. There was the numbers there. It was all in the data. And I got myself the local branch of the Democratic Party of Japan supported me. I had the support of 10 members of parliament and financiers and stuff to run for office. And it turns out that the Democratic Party of Japan, the selection for candidates was controlled by 3 people at the time. Ichiro Ozawa, Naoto Kan, and Yukio Hatoyama. And it turns out Ozawa works for J. Rockefeller. And Hatoyama is a Freemason, which means he must obey orders from European royal families on pain of death. And Naoto Kan was a North Korean agent. So Japan wasn't really democratic. It was run by this group. And after that, they sent an order to kill me. And the South Korean secret police got wind of this, and they told the Chinese. And I got contacted by a Chinese group that offered me protection.
Is this the Dragon family?
No, this would be the red and the blue.
Oh, the red and the blue, okay.
And so suddenly I found myself right smack in the middle of a giant secret war between huge secret societies I never even knew really existed until that time.
I mean, that's one hell of a story. And where have you taken it since then? I mean, I know you've been campaigning and you've been involved in lots of research and so on, but where has that taken you in terms of your life?
Look, first of all, when the Japanese are telling me that we Westerners were ruled by the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, I thought, well, that's kind of strange. I mean, I worked for Forbes, which, as you know, lists billionaires, and Rockefeller would be somewhere like number 300 on the list. I mean, he's rich, but he's, just one of the many rich people. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying, why do they think this guy rules us? And I had to go back to the 1918 edition of Forbes magazine to find out that, his grandfather, Rockefeller the First, had $300 billion in today's money. And he suddenly became poor, quote unquote, because he gave all his money away.
Oh, to his foundation.
To his foundation. And then I realized they use foundations as a cover. Mm-hmm. And so there are like 200 or more foundations linked to the Rockefellers that control literally trillions of dollars. And they don't pay inheritance tax, and they don't have to disclose. And I went through the financial books, and I realized, my God, these guys own about 40% of the Japanese stock market. And the same, I'm sure it's even more in the European and U.S. stock markets. And this is when I stumbled into this group. there's these various trust funds that are used as vehicles by what you could call the royal families, or the it's an inbred group of families, and they hide their wealth through these foundations, and the foundations don't really disclose how much they own. But I did a lot of research, forensic paperwork research, and I came to the conclusion that this small group of families owns about 40% of the world. Maybe 10,000 people.
Yeah, that's
and even further, you're down to a very few individuals who are literally trillionaires if you include the amount of money they control through their foundations.
Okay, well, let's talk then about what their plans are for us.
Okay, one of the reasons the Chinese came to help me is that they had managed to eavesdrop on a few of these people's secret meetings, but essentially they had come to the conclusion that there were too many people on the planet, and that we were destroying the environment, and the only way to sort of save the planetary ecosystem was to reduce the world's population.
Do you think that the Georgia Guidestones, which say there should only be 500 million people instead of 7 billion, do you think that's their stated aim, their declaration, if you like?
I think the moderates want to reduce, so-called moderates want to reduce the population to 2 billion, and the more radicals, want it to be just 500 million or 100 million. But in my case, they actually invited me to join their group, and they told me they wanted to reduce the population, and they were going to use starvation and disease to do so. And their thinking is, look, we have all these what they call useless eaters, people who do nothing but destroy nature and have subsistence farms, and they don't do anything, and they're not necessary for the planet. This is how they think.
Mm-hmm.
And my argument with them was, well, that's nonsense. Why don't you give these people a chance to develop their potential? And how many Einsteins are dying of potential Einsteins are dying of starvation and dysentery at age 3, because of your, very, very incompetent development policies.
So I take it you turned down their offer, did you?
Well, look, they offered me the job of Minister of Finance of Japan, but I had to go along with this genocidal plan, and so yeah, I did reject it. And instead, I said I'm going to, remove these bastards from power, and decided to join a battle against them. And maybe it's these days with everybody talking about the Federal Reserve Board and stuff. It seems kind of obvious now, but my first job was a reporter at the Bank of Japan and the Ministry of Finance. And, I was, like I said, the top level of the business journalism profession for, more than 2 decades. And never once did I find out that the Federal Reserve Board was privately owned, or the Bank of England stuff. It was just simply not known. Now everybody knows.
Everybody knows that the Federal Reserve banks in America were founded by an act in Congress in 1913, the Federal Reserve Act, and as you say, they're privately owned.
But when I started this, it wasn't anywhere. It wasn't on the internet. It was nowhere. People didn't know.
So do you think their agenda is hotting up because they don't want us to know, and we are now knowing? Do you think the internet is something, they've got this act, they're trying to bring in this SOPA Act to stop people getting on the internet and finding out stuff, and do you think that this is speeding up their agenda?
If you get your hands on the dollar printing machine, you can act almost as if you were God. And this is what they did. They said, well, we're going to set up foundations and we're going to manage the planet. And I looked through it, and yes, they bought up all the textbook companies, they bought up all the newspapers and TV stations, they bought up the politicians, and they started a long-term campaign of highly centralized secret control of, the key levers of power in Western civilization.
Okay.